Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the comprehensive yet informal study of Merleau-Ponty's Phenomenology of Perception. Luca and Kirk here, along with myself, Matt. Hopefully, Harrison will join us in a bit. We shall see. But we're back in the preface. Hopefully, we'll finish the preface today. That would be pretty sick. We were all pretty blown away, I'd say. I don't know if any of us expected what happened last time in Merleau-Ponty, at least from what we had heard of him, or maybe we didn't hear of him, some of us, but certainly I didn't. I was quite impressed by his criticisms of Heidegger. I thought they were very similar to my own, and his sort of
Wait, he criticizes Heidegger? I don't remember that.
or no, Husserl. I'm sorry, uh, Husserl. That's my bad. Yep. Uh, Good catch, but um, yeah, and but anyway, besides just criticism, he's been setting up this world of basically an empty subject, where he's saying uh, we obviously don't have just basement materialism that doesn't make sense, um, and Kant and Descartes had a big hand to play in that, but Merleau-Ponty thinks that uh, there's still something missing, and we don't really find this inner man. Uh, it results in incomplete reflection, which is then when he then goes on to talk about Husserl and say Husserl attempted to solve this problem, but he didn't do it in the right way. So that's basically what Merleau-Ponty is here to do. Husserl um, sort of spent too much time describing, I think, was really like the gist of the criticism. And didn't really come to maybe full understanding of what this new depth beyond like the cogito and beyond materialism is. I do think it's a lot more similar to what Kant and Descartes put forward than Merleau-Ponty admits myself, just because uh, I have readings of them that actually are quite open to this sort of empty subjectivity, psychoanalytic reading especially. Um, but Merleau-Ponty is gonna hopefully elaborate on his position and do some more exciting explorations onto what uh, this sort of non-dogmatic subjectivity is. And based on the title of the work, I think we can pretty safely guess it's going to have something to do with perception, and for other things I've heard from other people and other sources, be very based around having a body and perceiving body. But we'll see. So yeah, we're in the preface. Hopefully we can finish it, and I think we can get into it pretty soon. Does anybody else have any preliminary remarks or anything of that sort? Um, okay. Would anyone like to begin reading? Okay, I can read.
Okay, I can.
Um, okay, so we're picking up after this little three dot break. Okay, so from this we can see the true sense of the famous phenomenological reduction. And what is this true sense? Talking about this inner man. That there is no inner man, right? There's really just a subject sort of geared towards the world. So that's the context, by the way. Okay, so from this we can see the true sense of the famous phenomenological reduction. There's probably no other question upon which Husserl himself spent more time attempting to come to an understanding, nor one to which he returned more often, since the problematic of the reduction occupies a significant place in the unpublished materials. For a long time, and even in his final writings, the reduction is presented as the return to a transcendental consciousness in front of which the world is spread out in an absolute transparency, animated throughout by a series of opperceptions whose reconstruction, beginning from their results, is the task of the philosopher. Thus, my sensation of red is apperceived as a manifestation of a certain sensed red, which is in turn sensed as a manifestation of a red surface, which is in turn sensed as the manifestation of a red box, which is in the end sensed as a manifestation as a profile of a red thing, namely this book. Thus, this would be the apprehension of a certain highly matter. I don't know how to say that. I'm not in the. What is that? I can't tell if that's. I think that's Greek. Hylomorphism, similar type thing. I don't know. Anyway, matter as signifying a phenomenon of a higher degree, and the sense giving, the active signifying operation that might be the definition of consciousness, and the world would be nothing other than the signification world. The phenomenological reduction would thus be idealist in the sense of a transcendental idealism that treats the world as a unity of value that is not divided between, say, Paul or Pierre. That is, a unity in which their perspectives intersect, and that causes Pierre's consciousness and Paul's consciousness to communicate. This is because the perception of the world by Pierre is not Pierre's doing, nor is the perception by Paul Paul's doing. Rather, in both cases, is the doing or the work of pre-personal consciousnesses whose communication raises no problems, since this very communication is in fact required by the definition of consciousness, sense, and truth. Insofar as I am conscious, that is, insofar as something has a sense for me, I am neither here nor there, nor Pierre nor Paul. In no way do I distinguish myself from another consciousness, since we are all immediate presences in the world, and since this world, being the system of truths, is unique by definition. A consistent transcendental idealism strips the world of its opacity and its transcendence. The world is precisely one that we represent to ourselves, not insofar as we are men or empirical subjects, but insofar as we are all one single light, and insofar as we all participate in the one without dividing it. Reflective analysis is unaware of the problem of others, just as it is unaware of the problem of the world, because from the first flicker of consciousness, it grants me the power to go toward a truth that is universal by right, and since the other is himself without thisness, without place, without a body, the alter and the ego are one and the same in the true world, which is the unifier of minds. There is no difficulty in understanding how I can think the other, because the I, and consequently the other, are not trapped in the fabric of phenomena and have a value rather than an existence. Nothing is hidden behind these faces or these gestures, and there are no landscapes that remain inaccessible to me, but there is a touch of shadow that owes its existence to the light. Okay, well, that's pretty big. I think he's really just in this paragraph describing this phenomenological reduction, which basically can be summed up to be this one, right? This one without division. This very sort of I'm reminded of like Plotinus. Maybe even like a Plato, right? This sort of world of forms, or yeah, I guess Plotinus would honestly be the the best example. You know, the one, the unity. This sort of almost, I mean, you know, someone like Hegel might say this indeterminate oneness, right? The famous night in which all cows are black, where things are so indeterminate, so same that there's really no actual difference between things, and the phenomenological viewpoint, I guess, under this phenomenological reduction is that there is perceived difference only because it said it somewhere. I guess signification and maybe like reflection is what brings these like divisions into this one, this primordial one. Maybe also Schelling is similar too. Hence the criticism of the night in which all cows are black. So, but yeah, that seems to be sort of the this phenomenological reduction. Sort of just all these apperceptions into one big, you know, world that we then sort of piece off from. I mean, my biggest issue, at least with how like phenomenology presents this, is this sort of I don't know. I mean, maybe Merleau-Ponty and I are on the same page with the criticism because uh, I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it more in this next paragraph, but just to sort of speak on it, uh, he says something where he compares it to like transcendental idealism. Uh, uh, where does he do that? That literally happened. Uh, yeah, okay, here we go. Sorry, it took me a second to find it. The phenomenological reduction will thus be idealist in the sense of a transcendental idealism that treats the world as a unity of value that isn't divided right between people or consciousnesses. Uh, yeah, yeah. This sort of conception of consciousness as just this bland, indeterminate unity, right? Where there's no actual individuation. There's basically nothing, right? If this, we're almost at like the beginning of the science of logic, right? Where there's just this sort of nothingness that is so indeterminate, but it still is there, right? So that's maybe the sort of dialectical contradiction. But anyway, to more what I was trying to say originally, the method in which at least Husserl seemed to try to uh, get towards this in the experience and judgment, and maybe he made better efforts that I just haven't read because I haven't read all of Husserl. I've really only read experience and judgment, but um, yeah, the way in which he tried to get to this sort of pre-reflective oneness, just it's even described here animated throughout the series of opperceptions, his reconstitution beginners. Yeah, so he basically just keeps abstracting away uh, determinacy from our experience, uh, and moves towards these more vague notions of unity, right? And we sort of get examples of this, right? In the case of a red book, right? There's an opperception of a sense red, and then of a red surface, and of a red box, and then a profile of a red thing. So we match these apperceptions with a profile, I guess, of a book, or a profile, yeah, of a maybe like some universal book, and then we like synthesize it together. Um, yeah, but it wasn't. I don't know. The synthesis wasn't sort of as Kant put it forward in a very sort of like systematic, explanatory way. It was just sort of like naming, right? It's like red surface, sensed red, red box, and it's just like, okay, how are you separating these? How are you? And it seems his only method was just abstraction and abstraction, and I don't know. It just didn't. I don't know. it seemed like he was just playing abstraction games, and then that's where it gets you, right? It gets you so abstract to the point where you're just at this one without unity. It's like, well, what does that even mean at that point? I mean, so that's sort of my issue with what's being laid out here with this phenomenological reduction, but which hopefully explains maybe what the phenomenological reduction, at least in my eyes, is in terms of Husserl and what I've read from Husserl. So I want to make that clear. That's my a lot of my stuff, but overall, more objectively, so to speak, I guess, yeah, we do have this sort of abstracted away oneness without division at the basis of experience, right? It's because it's the pre-reflective. So, okay. Does anyone else have anything to say about this? Any questions or comments? Things you find interesting or challenging? Hmm. Okay. Would anyone like to read the next paragraph? Okay. I can continue reading. For Husserl, however, we know that there is indeed a problem of others, and the alter ego, the other myself, is a paradox. If another person is truly for himself, beyond his being for me, And if we are for each other, not separately for God, then we must appear to each other. For both must have an exterior, and there must be, besides the perspective of the for oneself, for my view upon myself and the other's view upon himself, also perspective of for others, my view upon others and the view of others upon me. Of course, these two perspectives cannot be in each of us as merely juxtaposed, for then others would not see me and I would not see others. I must be my exterior, and the other's body must be the other person himself. This paradox and this dialectic between the ego and the alter are only possible if the ego and the the ego and the alter ego are defined by their situation and are not set free from all inherence. And that is, only if philosophy is not completed with the return to myself, and only if, through reflection, I do not discover merely my presence to myself, but also the possibility of an outside spectator. Or again, this is possible only if, at the very moment I experience my existence, and even at that extreme point of reflection, I am still lacking the absolute density that would draw me outside of time. And only if I discover myself in a sort of inner weakness that prevents me from being absolutely individual and that exposes me to the gazes of others as one man among men, or at the very least as one consciousness among consciousnesses. The cogito has, up until our present day, devalued the perception of others. It has taught me that the eye is only accessible to itself, since it has defined me through through the thought that I have of myself, which I am clearly alone in having, at least in this ultimate sense. In order for the word other not to be meaningless, my existence must never reduce itself to the consciousness that I have of existing. It must, in fact, encompass the consciousness that one might have of it, and so also encompass my embodiment in nature and at least the possibility of an historical situation. The cogito must find me in a situation, and it is on this condition alone that transcendental subjectivity will, as Husserl says, be an intersubjectivity. As a mediating ego, I can of course distinguish the world and things for myself, since I clearly do not exist in the manner of things. I must not even separate myself from my body I must even separate myself from my body insofar as it is understood as a thing among things, or as a sum of my physico-chemical processes. But even if the thinking that I thus discover has no place in either objective time or objective space, it is not without a place in the phenomenological world. I rediscover the world, which I had distinguished from myself as a sum of things or of processes tied together through causal relations, in myself as the permanent horizon of all my thoughts, and as a dimension in relation to which I never cease situating myself. The true cogito does not define the existence of the subject through the thought that the subject has of existing, does not convert the certainty of the world into a certainty of the thought about the world, and finally does not replace the word itself with the signification world. Rather, it recognizes my thought as inalienable fact, and it eliminates all form of idealism by revealing me as being in the world. Whoa! So maybe we're making a transition from Husserl to Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty's criticism. I guess of idealism. So first, right, he thinks sort of idealism is this sort of separation from the world, right? As he explains here, this sort of I took it to be a phenomenological reduction. Yeah, but so this is so he thinks Husserl's basically being a closeted transcendental idealist, which for Merleau-Ponty means this sort of separation and indeterminate oneness, it seems, and then he goes on to say that this is a problem because Husserl on one hand wants this sort of like oneness existing for the self, but then he also understands that there's an intersubjective life world. That is the basis of all our knowledge and all of our reflective experiences. But how does that exist if the world is just for me? So there's this sort of weird thing. There's this paradox, and then basically Merleau-Ponty saying, well, then we can't take the this I think therefore I am in such a strict thinking to oneself sort of thing. There needs to be this there needs to be this at least addition to our notion of subjectivity. It seems for Merleau-Ponty. Um, he says yes, of course. We must separate ourselves from the body and the world, since we're not like that. But uh, uh, he says and to recognize the thought as an inalienable fact and eliminate, yeah. So we have to understand that, okay, maybe even though we as subjects aren't in the world or aren't part of the world, uh, the fact that we can think ourselves of subjects is dependent on us being in the world. So this is interesting. This is, to get psychoanalytic with it again. It seems like he's proposing, what some sort of like split subjectivity here, right? It's like on one hand, this, isn't us, right? I am not my body. I am, I am not, something that can be reduced in the world, right? I can't be like localized, right? In the, you know, by any like, neurological thing or physical thing or anything like that. But I also, we're also obviously dependent on the world, right? If someone like shoots you in the head, you're not going to be thinking anymore, So there's this weird thing. So there's a split, right, between these like senses of self, or even if it's not a sense of self. I mean, that's, I guess, the psychoanalytic thing would be like there's a split sense of self, but I mean, I think Merleau-Ponty saying there's this like dependency for the self upon this being in the world. So that's interesting. Okay, any thoughts or questions?
I was mainly going to talk about that last point you were making and kind
Yeah.
of, I was thinking to myself whether or not it's like to clarify if that is not paradoxical but contradictory. But I feel like after you re-explained it, I don't think it's that contradictory because the
Well,
way he explains it. Sorry,
what's the difference between something being paradoxical and contradictory?
that was just choosing words to like which word I was going to use, and then okay. Um, mm, I originally was thinking, oh, if he's saying he's a part of the world, he's not a part of the world, but is dependent on it. I didn't understand how it wasn't contradictory. I think it makes much more. I think it makes a little more sense after you re-explained it, where it's like exactly the point where we are not, at least how he's describing, he is not the him as a consciousness or whatever is not a part of the world as he sees it, but rather we still are dependent on like our physical, I don't know, representation in the world. We're still like reliant on being alive or like fully together to be able to even think at all. um I was kind of not understanding that point. I don't know if I'm describing it correctly either, but I think it makes much more sense now, that last point you made, because I was thinking it was contradictory and I was like, how does that make any sense? But I think you did a good
Yeah,
job
no,
of
it's an
clarifying.
interesting. This is like one of the classic problems of like philosophy, right? This relationship between the world uh, and the self. I mean, you were seeing, Luca. I think you were there for the Schelling study where we were. This is also Schelling's concern, right? And he's also like, okay, there's clearly two things going on here, and they're different, but they're both also necessary for each other. So, yeah, there is this certainly a tension, but and maybe a contradiction at first if you're taking the truth of the things to seriously, be totally idealism, totally materialism. Yeah, I think there is a contradiction there, but as we're seeing through more developed philosophy, uh, we can sort of move through this contradiction into a new understanding. So uh, I guess that's to answer, I guess, your uh, wondering about whether it's a contradiction or not, and I think it
Yeah.
can be, but I don't. Yeah, I think we're gonna get some answer here that is gonna clear that up, beginning with this this ending of this paragraph. So, um, All right, yeah. Is there anything else before we move on? Uh, would anyone like to read the next paragraph? I can continue reading. I'm just going to sip water. Okay, here we go. Because we are through and through related to the world, the only way for us to catch sight of ourselves is by suspending this moment, by refusing to be complicit with it, or as Husserl often says, to see it without taking part, or again, to put it out of play. This is not because we renounce the certainties of common sense and of the natural attitude. On the contrary, these are the constant theme of philosophy, but rather because, precisely as the presuppositions of every thought are, they are taken for granted, and they pass by unnoticed, and because we must abstain from them for a moment in order to awaken them and to make them appear. Perhaps the best formulation of the reduction is the one offered by Husserl's assistant Eugene Fink when he spoke of a wonder before the world. Reflection does not withdraw from the world toward the unity of consciousness as the foundation of the world. Rather, it steps back in order to see see transcendencies spring forth, and it loosens the intentional threads that connect us to the world in order to make them appear. It is alone conscious of the world because it reveals the world as strange and paradoxical. Husserl's transcendental is not Kant's, and Husserl criticizes Kantian philosophy for being a worldly philosophy because it makes use of our relation to the world, which is the engine of the transcendental deduction, and makes the world immanent to the subject rather than standing in wonder before the world and conceiving the subject as a transcendence toward the world. Husserl's entire misunderstanding with his interpreters, with his existential dissidence, and ultimately with himself, comes from the fact that we must, precisely in order to see the world and to grasp it as paradox, rupture our familiarity with it, and this rupture can teach us nothing except the unmotivated springing forth of the world. The most important lesson of the reduction is the impossibility of a complete reduction. This is why Husserl always wonders anew about the possibility of the reduction. I love how he's writing this. It's so like in beat. There's like a rhythm to this. It's like, but there's a this and there's a rupture, and that's why this is. Oh God, I'm loving Merleau-Ponty every sentence I read more and more. Anyway, continuing on. If we were absolute spirit, fucking Hegel mentioned. We got to get the sound button. Sorry for interrupting the flow of the study. We got to get the sound buttons though for this. Where's the?
He has a soundboard.
We bring this up during con study, and we haven't really used it for many others. But absolute spirit has been mentioned, so I gotta. If we were absolute spirit, the reduction would not be problematic. But since, on the contrary, we are in and toward the world, and since even our reflections take place in the temporal flow that they are attempting to capture, since they flow alone therein, as Husserl says, there is no thought that encompasses all of our thought. Or again, as the unpublished material says, the philosopher is a perpetual beginner. This means that he accepts nothing as established from what men or scientists believe they know. This also means that philosophy itself must not take itself as established in the truths it has managed to utter, that philosophy is an ever-renewed experiment of its own beginning, that it consists entirely in describing this beginning, and finally, that radical reflection is conscious of its own dependence, of an unreflected life, that is its initial constant and final situation. Far from being, as was believed, the formula for an idealist philosophy, the phenomenological reduction is in fact the formula for an existential philosophy. Heidegger's being in the world only appears against the background of the phenomenological reduction. Cool. Yeah, so Merleau-Ponty here is just chugging along with his critique of Husserl, and I think the critique of Husserl honestly could be a Kantian response to Husserlian thought, right? Because he says, here Husserl's whole thing against Kant really is that Kant is a worldly philosopher. He can't remove the subjectivity from the world. And Merleau-Ponty fires back saying, well, we can't we can't really do this complete reduction that Husserl wants to do. It's impossible. Um, we can, we have to acknowledge it as paradox and rupture our familiarity with it, right? Because Husserl's looking. This is Husserl's mission, as I understand it, to get to this primordial familiarity that Husserl thinks Kant is not getting to. But we can't do it. And like Kant, Kant sort of sees that, right? Kant says, yeah, there's really no world I can be familiar with without the subject, right? That's what the transcendental deduction is all about. There is no cohesive world. There is no world to be familiar with without this, I think, right? Without this subjectivity, without this thought, and so. And then obviously for Kant, right, that leads to when we try to go deeper than that, right? In Kant, we get to the transcendental dialectic, right? We run into paradox. It's like, well, okay, if the world is like this and subjectivity is like this, then what about God, and what about the soul, and what about all these other issues? And maybe this isn't exactly what Merleau-Ponty's getting at, but really, even if you're not looking to tackle the specific issues that Kant does in like the antinomies or the paralogisms or whatever, it's still hard. It's impossible, right? As he's saying, as Merleau-Ponty's putting out here, to try to peel back this layer of subjectivity without running into contradiction, right? The only way to sort of make this cohesive worldview is to lay behind the contradiction, right, and to sort of put that aside and to just, right. It's almost like the opposite of what Husserl was really trying to say, right? From this Merleau-Ponty view, and I think from a very Kantian view as well. If you want a cohesive experience, you have to, and something to be familiar with, you have to sort of overly become familiar with the world through your own subjective position. You can't. But the more away you get from that, you'll run into paradox and run into rupture, run into unfamiliarity. That is where this is gonna. That is where this sort of basis is gonna come out of, not out of this, not out of familiarity, which again is also very psychoanalytic, right? They're right because to do this complete reduction, to have a total familiarity, right? It wouldn't be a reduction; it would be a increase in probably the symbolic realms, and in language, right? Language of the other. That's how we get familiar with things. That's how we're given.
That sounds kind of that sounds to me kind of Lacanian.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. From this Lacanian psychoanalytic point, right? This is exactly what familiarity is. And it's why it it's yeah that's how it works, right? We're born into this world and we're given language to use. We're given familiarities to be familiar with, and that's sort of how we form, our the imaginary and the symbolic, right? Is well, we're given the symbolic and we form images, right? And we form familiarities and expectations of things, and it's and we become familiar with our world, right? And that's impossible if you're trying to peel back from that and do a sort of reduction. It's going to lead to contradiction. It's going to lead to rupture, right? Because this notion of familiarity is based on these things that you're trying to peel back from.
Wait, so can I actually ask
Yeah.
to dig in specifically? Because from my understanding is that Merleau-Ponty is, criticizing the phenomenological reduction. I think I'm just not understanding maybe kind of, so how does that work for Husserl, like the phenomenological reduction? Is that just like essentially kind of temporarily viewing himself or taking his perspective as like an absolute spirit, where he's like not in a part of the world at all? and then starting from scratch, or am I kind of
Yeah,
thinking of it
that's the
incorrect?
goal, I think. I mean, I don't know too much about it in detail, but I'm just going on what I read in the one book,
Yeah.
Experience and Judgment, combined with Merleau-Ponty's exposition of Husserl's thought in this work we're reading right now. And it does sort of, it's very similar to what you said, I think, if not, right on point. Yeah, it's what we were talking about earlier, I think, really, with this sort of primordial oneness that is, the basis for everything else that we then come to sort of uh, cognize and to sort of, for Husserl, it would be, that once we're engaged in typical, everyday reflective experience, it's built on this sort of one, this that and the phenomenological reduction is to try to get there to like become familiar with it, right? To become familiar again with this world that Husserl thought we were familiar with and we've lost in this process of, philosophizing, right? And by being Kantians, Husserl thinks we've lost this. Um,
Yeah.
but
And so,
yeah,
sorry, can I ask?
yeah,
So,
go ahead.
just I'm trying to clarify. I'm just because I assume you guys know better than I. So, like Merleau-Ponty is then criticizing it, saying you can't do that because to remove, you can't look at things from a perceptual point or dimension that you've never, without familiarity, because you are like dependent on the world regardless, even if you don't kind of understand, even if you try to peel it back, that you're still the things you understand, the way that you think, are still one way or another tacitly impacted by being a part of the world, or by at least being dependent upon the world. Am I like misunderstanding that, or?
I think what he's saying here is that uh, you can't you can't do such a reduction and still expect familiarity. Like, you're going to get
Hmm.
contradiction, you're going to get paradox, you're going to get rupture. Um, that you can't just do what you're doing and be like, oh yes, now I've done it, I've reached this, mythical, you know you know I mean, for Husserl it's not mythical, but for this sort of sought after oneness, right? Baseline experience. You can't just be like, oh yes, I've gotten here, I'm home, I'm back, baby. You can't do that. It's
Because
gonna be
self-induced ego.
unfamiliar. It's because it's fundamentally consists of paradox, of rupture. That's sort of like what defines, essentially, it seems, this phenomenological, reductive, whatever Merleau-Ponty is going to develop it into being. It's going to be based in paradox and based in rupture.
Hmm.
Because that's how, I mean, I'm sort of making an inference here, but it seems because that's how we're getting there, right? It seems sort of almost implicit in what we need to do to even get there, is break with our familiarity, is break with our, uh, you know, our non-paradoxical understanding of the world. And that's why I was comparing it to Kant and to Lacan, because for them that's what happens when you do that, when you investigate and peek behind your familiar world and your natural consciousness and your everyday experience. What you get is rupture and paradox, and like for Kant, the breakdown in metaphysics, and for Lacan, trauma and all these things. I don't know if Merleau-Ponty would go that far, because he does seem to be taking Heidegger's. Although I don't know how he feels about Heidegger, because Heidegger I don't think would agree. I think Heidegger, I have to read more Heidegger, and I'm going to be taking a class this semester. But to my understanding, his notion of this being in the world is sort of not as, it's sort of a lot more familiar, I think, or familiar. God, it's sort of a lot more similar to, I think, what Husserl was after. Um, so I don't know in what. Yeah, well, he's saying it only appears against the background of the phenomenological reduction. So I think Merleau-Ponty is going more in this direction that I'm arguing that Kant and Lacan are as well. And this is, to get back to the, emphasize the answer to your question. Sorry, this has been a little long, but yeah, it's this very paradoxical, fundamentally fundamentally so paradoxical. I guess you could call it basis, really. For everything else that we know. Does that help? Sorry if that was
Yeah,
confusing.
that does help.
Okay.
And then like I don't know a lot of these like terms, so I see we like use the word like transcendentalism. I'm kind of just like inferring it from what we're reading that it's more on the like what Husserl is saying. And
Where do you see that?
oh, I don't know, transcendences. I've heard like Harrison use this word, and I think I misread it right around here.
Transcendences. I remember reading it. I just don't remember exactly where it was.
Oh yeah, transcendental deductions.
Oh,
Right?
transcendental deduction. That's a section. That is referring to something very specific, that Kant did in the Critique of Pure Reason, um, where basically, uh, Kant is looking to. Um, I thought I was gonna be able to simply explain it, but the more I'm like thinking, the more it's kind of difficult. Basically, what Kant does in the transcendental deduction is show that experience, uh, necessarily, uh, is founded upon, a unified subjectivity. Uh, Experience just cannot work if it's not founded upon like a subject that is self-aware of their own like thinking. Um, and there are like reasons for that, and we can like, I'll probably explain that more elsewhere if you want later. But that's
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
basis, I
I
think.
didn't mean to like. Yeah,
No, 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 you're good. Hopefully, that's just enough context for what that is.
yeah, yeah.
Transcendental deduction, yeah.
Thank you.
Which is why he says it's the. Which is why this makes use of our relation to the world as the engine of the transcendental deduction. So what that means for Kant is, or what that means here is that, the transcendental deduction is built upon, this idea that experience works because we are thinking, self-aware subjects, um, and that's right, like you said, that's, not what Husserl's doing, right? Husserl's transcendental is not Kant's, because for Husserl, his transcendental is one that removes any,
Relation to the world.
yeah, or separation really between subject and object, right? It's just this oneness, right, of just consciousness, like consciousness, just without any determinacy, really, as far as I understand it. So, um,
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Actually, I was really like, that helps.
cool. I'm yeah, very glad. Okay. We've got a good amount of preface left. Do we just want to keep marching through?
I'm fine
Sure.
with marching through. I texted Harrison. I don't know what he's doing, he's up to. But if you guys like don't want to go through because Harrison's not here, I'm fine with that. Either way, I'm good to go through with it if you guys want to.
Um, yeah, I think we can keep going. The other one was like over an hour. This is 43 minutes, so I think we can go. Yeah, we let's just see how far we get, and then I'll check again maybe around like the hour-ish mark where we're at. Cool. Does anyone want to read? Uh, I can read. I'm just gonna take another sip. All right. Husserl's concept of essences becomes muddled through a similar misunderstanding. He declares that every reduction at the same time, as being transcendental, it is also necessarily, eidetic. God, I've always been horrible at saying that word. Last semester was like embarrassing. Eidetic. I'm just eidetic. Eidetic. Let's say eidetic. In other words, we cannot bring our perception of the world before the philosophical gaze without ceasing to be identical with that thesis about the world, or with that interest for the world that defines us, without stepping back to take this side of our commitment in order to make itself appear as a spectacle, or without passing over from the fact of our existence to the nature of our existence, that is, from existence to essence. But here, the essence is clearly not the goal, but rather a means, and our actual commitment to the world is precisely what must be understood and raised to the concept. And this is what polarizes all of our conceptual fixations. The necessity of passing through essences does not signify that philosophy takes them as an object, but rather that our existence is too tightly caught in the world to know in order to know itself at such the moment when it is thrown into the world, and that our existence needs the field of ideality in order to know and conquer its facticity. Wow, that's like a poetic thing, especially with how it's phrased and potentially even in its meaning. Yeah, the point here seems to be, and I don't exactly know how this works, which is why I'm trying to understand it myself. But maybe if I just like start explaining, it'll make more sense. But the I think more like literally what he's saying here is that essence is the method through which we get to this sort of bare existence. Um,
But this is different than the idea that some of the other French existentialists had, that existence precedes essence.
Um, yeah, I don't exactly know the order in which Merleau-Ponty would place them. It seems like he's almost placing them as like two distinct things that are like simultaneous. Because he's saying on one hand we can't escape essence, but also that he's kind of acknowledging that essence isn't the goal, and he wants to get to existence, but we can't. We have to pass through essence. Yeah, it's not the goal, but a means. And our actual commitment in the world is precise as it must be understood and raised to the concept. It polarizes all our conceptual fixations. So it's almost like to get to exist. Yeah, I mean it's very almost anti-existentialist the more I'm thinking about it. It's it's almost like classical rationalism. You know, it's like okay, well, if we want to get to existence, then we have to become so in tune with our own essence that you know it becomes existence. Um, I mean, Kirk, if what you said about Merleau-Ponty being like a monist is true, then this would make sense because then there's really no fundamental difference between essence and existence. Uh, well, I guess there is, but maybe not. Maybe they're two parts of a bigger, I don't phenomenological. I have no idea. I don't know. This is challenging. Yeah, I can't really tell exactly just from this, other than that essence is the way through which we get to existence. But I don't know how like equal he thinks they are. I don't know how like parallel. I don't know if like one is still ordered over the other because existence is still the goal. Essence isn't. But also, existence as a goal is meaningless if we don't consider essence. Yeah, because he says our actual commitment to the in the world is precisely what must be understood and raised to the concept, and this is what polarizes all our conceptual fixations. So we have to take our commitment in the world, which I think to be existence, and raise it to the concept, which seems to be like essence. So yeah, it's this is difficult. I don't know exactly what he's saying other than essence is necessary to grasp existence. Um, yeah, I don't know. Does anybody else have anything else on this?
No, I mean, I heard that Merleau-Ponty was critical of the fellow French existentialists, or fellow French philosophers for the things. But yeah, that sounds like a reasonable summary.
Cool. Yeah, he definitely does seem to be criticizing it there. Well, it looks like he's gonna the Vienna Circle's getting name dropped. All right, so we can continue. Should I just keep reading, or does anyone else want to read?
Yeah, when he speaks of the Vienna Circle, is he talking about the Vienna Circle of Freud or the Vienna Circle of logical positivism?
I thought they were all considered part of the Vienna Circle. You can look up Vienna Circle. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Freud was in this because Freud was a pretty hard empiricist, at least for most of his life, I think. Wittgenstein. periphery, so he wasn't in the inner circle. This is so funny. This is
What's
like
so
high school
funny?
shit. Like it's a clique. Oh my god. Okay.
Hey, what's so
Um,
funny?
what's that?
What's so funny?
The fact that there's just a fucking like inner circle and a periphery. Like this is like some like prestigious society that I don't know. It's just very. I don't know. It seems to take itself very seriously in a way that I don't think is like reflective of any actual importance. So. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I
Well,
thought
yeah,
Freud was in here.
no. The Vienna Circle were logical positivists. I think they would be anti-Freudian because they would say it's unverifiable.
No,
That
well
theory.
Freud was into positivism, I think. I'm pretty sure.
I no, I thought he was against that, but okay.
No, I don't think he was. He was very like his critiques of philosophy like as a field are very positivist.
Okay.
I don't know. Well, maybe not. I don't know. He was very empiricist and very it's that's clear throughout many of his writings, but anyway. Well, whatever. Okay. Let's just okay. Let's see what Merleau-Ponty has to say about the Vienna Circle. Kirk, did you want to read or no?
No.
Okay. Uh, the Vienna Circle, as we know, claims categorically that we can only relate to his significations. For example, consciousness is not for them precisely what we are. Rather, it is a recent and complicated signification that we should employ carefully, and only after having made explicit the numerous significations that have contributed to determining it through the course of a world's semantic evolution. This logical positivism is the antithesis of Husserl's thought. Whatever shifts of meaning may have ultimately delivered this word and this concept of consciousness to us as a linguistic acquisition, we have a direct means of reaching what it designates. We have the experience of ourselves and of this consciousness that we are. In fact, all the significations of language are measured against this experience, and it ensures that language means something for us. It is the still mute experience that must be brought to the pure expression of its own sense. Husserl's essences must bring with them all of the living relations of experience, like the net that draws up both quivering fish and seaweed from the seabed. Thus, we must not follow Jean Wall in saying Husserl separates essences from existence. Separated essences are the essences of language. It is the very function of language to make essences exist in a separation that is merely apparent. Since through language they still rely upon the pre-predicative life of consciousness. What appears in the silence of originary consciousness is not only what these words mean, but also what these things mean, and is not that is the core of primary signification around which acts of naming and of expressions are organized. So yeah, the Vienna Circle takes language and experience to be two separate things, and then language can align. If something is meaningful, it's when language aligns with experience, and it's not meaningful if it doesn't. I mean, that seems to be like at least the picture Merleau-Ponty is painting here. And he's saying Husserl is different from that. In fact, he's the antithesis of it, right? He's the opposite of this. Husserl's essences must bring up with them all the living relations of experience, like the net that draws up both quivering fish and seaweed from the seabed. I don't know much about Husserl's essences, like as Husserl explained them, but let's see. So Merleau-Ponty's separated essences are the essences of language. It is the very function of language to make essences exist in a separation. It's merely apparent. Yeah, so it seems like essence and existence for Husserl, I guess, are just both part of this, pre-predicative consciousness. That then becomes separated through language. But there really is no just bare existence without essence. Like, I guess essences are what make up, if we're following experience and judgment anyway, essences are involved in the pre-predication, and it's what allows predication to happen. It's what allows language to happen, or linguistic expressions at least to happen. which is very different, right? The logical positivists are interested in even entertaining this idea because for them, they've just got it set as basically, axiomatic that these two things are separate, and that's that. Okay, is there anything else? I think that's really all I have to say about that. Questions or comments, thoughts? Let's see how much further we have. Still quite a bit. Still quite a bit. Okay. Okay, let's see how far we are. Okay. Still got 5 minutes till an hour. But I'm wondering. Okay, I think we can probably try to get up to these stars, and then maybe I'll cut the recording, and then just because I don't want to get too insanely long. Okay. Okay. Would anyone like to continue reading? Okay. I'll continue. Seeking the essence of consciousness will thus not consist in working out the meaning of the word consciousness and in fleeing from existence into the universe of things said. Rather, it will be in rediscovering that actual presence of myself to myself, the fact of my consciousness, which is what the word and concept consciousness ultimately mean. Seeking the essence of the world is not to seek what it is as an idea after having reduced it to the theme of discourse. Rather, it is to seek what it in fact is for us prior to every thematization. Sensualism reduces the world by saying that ultimately we have nothing but states of ourselves. Transcendental idealism also reduces the world, since even if it makes the world certain, this is only in the name of the thought or the consciousness of the world, and as the mere correlate of our knowledge, such that the world becomes immanent to consciousness as the independent existence of things is thereby suppressed. On the contrary, the eidetic reduction is the commitment to make the world appear such as it is prior to every return to ourselves, and it is the attempt to match reflection to the unreflective life of consciousness. I aim at and perceive a world. If I were to follow sensualism in saying that there is nothing here but states of consciousness, and if I sought to distinguish my perceptions from my dreams, there's some sort of criteria, then I would miss the phenomenon of the world. For if I'm able to speak out dreams and reality, to wonder about the distinction between the imaginary and the real, and to throw the real into doubt, this is because I have in fact drawn this distinction prior to the analysis, because I have an experience of the real as well as one of the imaginary. The problem then is not to understand how critical thought can give itself secondary equivalence to this distinction. The problem is to make explicit our primordial knowledge of the real, quote unquote, and to describe the perception of the world as what establishes once and for all our idea of the truth. Thus, we must not wonder if we truly perceive a world. Rather, we must say the world is what we perceive. Yeah, so this is interesting. It's all about, really, I think, eliminating dualisms, which is quite Hegelian, I think, especially his critique here of transcendental idealism. I think this is very similar to what Hegel says about Kant, at least in the Science of Logic, where he sort of attacks Kant for saying like, well, he's like, on one hand, yes, Kant is a genius and had great insights, especially this notion of synthesis. It's very powerful and shows how the world, can be conveyed through thought and through the idea and through, and eventually, I mean, this is sort of beyond synthesis, but still the notion of synthesis allows for this, necessary dialectic that occurs beyond a certain point. But on the other hand, Hegel says, with all those insights, Hegel says Kant missed the point because he didn't make it immanent to consciousness, right? He he merely makes this, as Merleau-Ponty says, a correlate of our knowledge. This isn't reality in itself anymore for transcendental idealism, at least for Kant's, right? This is merely, the world of appearance and how things appear to us, um, as if there's, such a thing as a thing in itself that we are just differed from, but still also related to in a weird way because we can think of it and differentiate ourselves from it, but we can't access it. So it's a very, I think, Hegelian critique. They're both saying very similar, if not the same things, in terms of transcendental idealism. And yeah, his critique of what does he call it? Oh, sensualism. Sensualism reduces the world by saying ultimately we have nothing but states of ourselves. It's like, yeah, the it's I think this is the view that Daniel Dennett sort of took up, right, later on. He just actually died, I think, a few years ago, or a year ago or something like that. But this, I think, was his view, right? He's saying we just have states of ourselves. There isn't actual consciousness, guys. Consciousness is an illusion. It's just, we like have states, and that seems, I don't know. I haven't actually read much Dennett at all. I just sort of heard about him from in undergraduate and read a few things about him, but that seems to be his view. I think on some level, even if it's not Dennett specifically, there is definitely as there was in Merleau-Ponty's time, apparently, right? Because he's saying it. So this view that there are merely states of ourselves or of consciousness, and this isn't actually anything real. And then the which is almost actually similar to well, he says he picks up on the sensualism critique, but then brings us sort of a Cartesian point, or at least where Descartes starts. Right, this is one of Descartes' worries in the meditations. Right, he's like, what if I'm just dreaming? What if this isn't reality? And I think sort of what's something you can find in Descartes, even if it's just sort of implicitly, is that, well, there isn't actually a distinction between these that you can, right? That's why he gets so scared, right? because he's like, oh shit, there's really no different way to differentiate this. And something you could take away from that, even if Descartes doesn't explicitly, at least, is sort of drop this distinction between dreams and reality. But I guess sensualism maintains that, right? Because if things are just, if consciousness is just a dream and illusion, right? It's not reality. So I guess that's pretty accurate. Yeah, but then Merleau-Ponty says this is we can't just try to get to this some pre-set up notion of what we have as real, right? We can't just look to describe something real. We just have to start. We must say the world is what we perceive. Which is where Kant went in a lot of ways, but didn't make it imminent. So he's doing a very Hegelian thing, I think. This is Hegel might say we have to take reality in and for itself in this way, right? We can't just set up a dualism and then separate in itself and for its and then all the for others and for me, and we just have to sort of take it as it comes, not in like a naive way, just in a that's all we can do kind of way. And then go forward, right? So
This also kind of reminds me of Deleuze because I haven't read Deleuze, but I heard he talks about this idea of like a plane of immanence, where like he rejects dualisms between, like he does not believe difference should be based on dualism.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, he thinks difference is imminent to. He thinks experience pretty much is imminent as we experience different. As far as I can tell, I don't know. I have to read more Deleuze to understand, but that's my conception of Deleuze that I think is kind of accurate. Okay. Anything else?
No.
Questions, comments. Okay, we'll get to this point, I think, and then cut it. So, yeah, last paragraph here. Okay. Um, does anyone want to read it or no? Okay, I can read it. More generally, we must not wonder if our evident truths are really truths, or if, by some defect of our mind, what is evident for us would actually be revealed as illusory when measured against some truth in itself. For if we speak of illusion, this is because we have previously recognized illusions, and we can only do so in the name of some perception that, at the very moment, vouched for itself as true, such that doubt or the fear of being mistaken simultaneously affirms our power of unmasking error and could thus not uproot us from the truth. We are in the truth, and evidentness is the experience of the truth. To seek the essence of perception is not to declare that perception is presumed to be true, but rather that perception is defined as our access to truth. If I now wanted to follow idealism, basing this actual evidentness, this irresistible belief upon an absolute evidentness, that is, upon the absolute clarity of my thoughts for myself, or if I wanted to uncover in myself a creative thought that would establish the framework of the world or illuminate it throughout, then I would again be unfaithful to my experience of the world. I would then be seeking what makes this world possible rather than seeking what this world actually is. The evidentness of perception is neither adequate thought nor apodictic evidentness. The world is not what I think, but what I live. I am open to the world. I unquestionably communicate with it, but I do not possess it. It is hold on, my dog is barking. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I can never fully justify the permanent thesis of my life that there is a world, or rather, there is the world. This facticity of the world is what establishes the worldliness of the world. What makes it such that the world is a world, just as the facticity of the cogito is not an imperfection in it, but rather what assures me of my existence. The eidetic method is that of phenomenological positivism, grounding the possible upon the real. Okay, yeah. This is also very Hegelian, I think, because Hegel also is very into this idea of collapse between method and content, right? And this is, I think, what Merleau-Ponty is saying here as well, right? There isn't this. Right, I mean, this is also what Merleau-Ponty is critiquing, right? He's critiquing taking this content, right, that is the world, and then comparing it against some external, method or standard of truth. He's just saying we just have to collapse that distinction, right, and just start taking the world as it is. Similar, pretty much the same thing I think for Hegel. Hegel says philosophy is both,
Embrace the
the
real, so to
method.
speak.
What's that?
And it reminds you of embrace the real.
Yeah, it's a very I think that theme is carrying here, and he's just getting more specific in what he's arguing against and what he's sort of really taking down this notion of reality as an external standard and really just collapsing that difference between as Hegel would say the content and the method, and just I guess that's how I'm saying it, but that's what
For
I take
some
Hegel to
reason,
mean, and that's what I also take Merleau-Ponty here to mean. But what's up, Kirk?
was that?
Did you say something?
Yeah. What were we saying real quick?
What was I saying?
Yeah.
I was saying that Merleau-Ponty, I think, is similar to Hegel in that there's no difference between method and content. We just sort of have to start taking the two as one, and just there is a world. There is the world.
Well, I was gonna say this kind of reminds me of for some reason this kind of reminds me of Baudrillard, the idea of because like to my understanding Baudrillard says that like there's not like you can't assume an objectivity because all everything kind of involves subjective signification, but for some reason it kind of reminds me of that.
It could be. I'm not familiar enough with that aspect of Baudrillard's thought to say for sure. Um,
Well, I don't think Merleau-Ponty necessarily agrees with Baudrillard, but I'm just saying that specific point about signification just kind of made me think of it.
yeah, I mean, it could. Again, I'm not really super familiar with that specific aspect of Baudrillard's thought, but yeah. Um,
Oh, hello. You guys are reading the Baudrillard right
no, no,
now?
no. We're reading Merleau-Ponty. What's up, Pat? We're actually just finishing up this recording of
Oh, okay,
Phenomenology of
cool.
Perception. Um,
Well, I guess I'll just hang out in this chat, and if we're doing shelling after, I'll just be around for that.
yeah, that would be great. So I'll just finish this up then with a Merleau-Ponty wisdom of the day. Yeah, don't make any arbitrary distinction between method and content. That's not gonna get you anywhere um, towards this. What for Merleau-Ponty is a phenomenological reduction that really gets you towards a the real. It's that's just gonna end up distracting you from
Awesome. Thanks for that wisdom. I
yeah.
understood the whole reading, which I wasn't even around for. So,
Yeah, it was a good
yeah.
reading. It was a good reading. Well, it'll be on YouTube, Pat, if you're ever interested. So yeah, okay, that's what I have to say. Does anybody else have any Merleau-Ponty wisdoms of the day? This was another long one. I'm gonna see if I can come up with another, but maybe not.
No.
Okay. Oh yeah, another one. Embrace the paradox. Don't shy away from paradox just because it's paradox. That's not a good reason. It's yeah. See what you can do with it instead of just trying to order yourself in a familiar world for the sake of familiarity. It's another one. Yeah, I think familiarity will hide you from the fullness of the experience. That is, going back to the other wisdom of the day that can't be really separated from any external standard of truth. So okay, well that's it for me. Anybody else? Last minute comments? No. Wisdoms of the day. All right. So that's that. We'll see you next time for where I think we'll finish the preface. That'll be good. Kant and the Critique of Judgment mentioned in there, so that'll be cool. I should I should probably read up on that. I have to read more of the Critique of Judgment, so maybe I'll do that before next time. So, alrighty, well we'll see you then. God bless. Bye bye.